What's up, everybody, and welcome to Module 9 of the White Coat Compass. We have kind of made it into the big leagues. We are going to be talking about the medical school application, right? The actual application that you use to apply to medical school and kind of everything that it entails. So congratulations for making it to this point. You've learned so much already, but now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, the things that actually matter, the things that schools see, right? So let's dive in. We're going to talk about what is the primary application. Why do we call it primary versus something else? Why don't we just call it the application, right? There's a reason for that. We're going to define what something is when it's called a CAS. Some people say CAS, but it's CAS. We're going to talk about AMCAS versus ACOMAS. We're going to talk about shared materials, meaning across these two different types of applications, are there any materials that can be reused? We're going to talk about when you actually should submit your application. And I don't necessarily mean like what year of college. We've kind of already talked about that a little bit. I more so mean like what month, what week, what day, right? When should you actually submit that thing? We're going to talk about what does the application include. This is going to be the big stuff. Well, it's going to be the little stuff too, but this is kind of the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about today. What's actually on the application. We're going to talk about how to put your ducks in a row, how to get your application set up correctly and in a way that's going to convey what you want it to convey to medical schools. We're going to talk about what to expect when you actually submit the application. And we're going to talk about maybe some other stuff that you might need to know, right? We're going to talk about this little guy called the Casper exam, and we're going to talk about this little guy called the preview exam. And then we got a little bonus at the end. So let's dive right in. What is the primary application? Why do we call it that? Well, of course, this is the main application that you send to medical schools. It is one application that goes to all medical schools. And you may say, well, how does that work? Well, the way that it works is it utilizes a CAS system. CAS stands for Centralized Application Service. And so what this means is you give an application to the Centralized Application Service. For MD schools, it's called AMCAS. And then they send the application out to all your medical schools on your behalf. And there's a process for that. So there's essentially two different CASs. You have the MD CAS, which is called AMCAS. You've seen me, go away. You've seen me write AMCAS on many occasions. But then the one that you saw on the last slide was what we call ACOMAS, which is let me get this right, the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine Application Service. How about that? So my point in telling you this is that there is a separate application for DO schools and a separate application for MD schools. They're completely separate. You use two different websites. Everything's separate. Right here, I just put a kind of a screenshot of the AMCAS, AAMC. Mind you, the AAMC is the American Association of Medical Colleges. That's the MD association. So this is the AMCAS application. This is just a screenshot of kind of like what the home page of it looks like, what the first page looks like. Just it's there. So you can look at it, you can see it and see what it looks like. I just redacted a bunch of stuff like my address and all that mess. So let's talk about kind of the unique differences between AMCAS and ACOMAS and dive into that a little bit more. I want you to know that you can and should probably apply to MD schools and DO schools at the same time. So you can create an application for AMCAS and you can create an application for ACOMAS, and you could be working on those at the same time. You could submit them at the same time. Normally, this is how it works, right? You only apply to medical school one time. And if you apply to MD schools and DO schools, you would apply to them at the same time. So again, the applications are completely separate. They use different websites, different portals, as some people like to say. But here's something very, very important. Most of the application materials that you use for one can be used for the other, right? Because they share a lot of features. We're talking about personal statements. We're talking about, the courses that you took. You're going to have to type those into both application services. We're talking about your activities, your extracurricular activities, your hobbies, your leadership experiences, all that stuff. There's little essays that you have to write for these things, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But you can share those things across applications for the most part. Now, the only real thing to consider in doing all this is there are character limits that are in place for these different little activities on AMCAS and ACOMAS, and you have to make sure that your characters for each one of these little essays fits the requirements. Bear in mind also that they have similar but different costs, and also different but similar costs. They do cost similarly to apply to use these services, but again, you will apply to MD and DO schools most likely, and you will pay for each one that you apply to. Now, it's also important to know that MD schools cannot see if or where you applied to DO schools and vice versa. The DO programs have no idea that you applied to MD programs, although maybe they would assume that you would. And the MD schools cannot see that you applied to DO schools, although maybe they would assume that you would. Why would you apply to MD and DO schools? Well, it's really all about improving your chances. Your best chances are with a wider net, meaning you've cast a larger net out to more schools. And more school applications or more applications being received by schools improves your chances of getting an acceptance. That's just the basics of the numbers. If you want more about that, go back to the Building a School List video where we talk about this. Again, keep costs in mind if needed when it comes to applying to medical school. And I also want you to be aware of the fact that we talked about the fee assistance program for the MD application, the AMCAS application, and it can get you free applications to medical school, up to 20 of them. I want you to be aware of the fact that ACOMAS also has a fee assistance program, but it is not nearly as cool as the AAMC or AMCAS fee assistance program. The ACOMAS fee assistance program only waives your first application, which I think is $180, but then you pay for every subsequent application thereafter, and I believe those are $47 a piece. So just keep that in mind. You don't get a big old bundle of free applications to medical school with ACOMAS. Just something to keep in mind. So let's talk about when you actually submit the application. And the real answer to that is you apply when you're ready. You apply when your ducks are in a row, when you are actually able to submit a completed and good-looking application. But my saying that you should apply when you're ready is not meant to relinquish you of the responsibility of getting ready on time. You must get ready on time. Here's why. The MCAS application usually opens for so-called building on May 1st each year. What do I mean by building? Well, you can start to fill out the application during the building phase, but you cannot submit it just yet. So the earliest time that you can submit that MCAS application is usually the end of May. It may be the very beginning of June, and that varies from year to year, just depending on what the year looks like and what days fall when. So what this means is you basically have 1 month to kind of fill out and complete your application. And you may think to yourself, oh, that's fine. That's plenty of time. I can complete an application in a month. But the problem is there are things that you have to consider, and we're going to talk even more about this, but there are other things going on in your life at this time. You may be getting ready to graduate at this time. You're probably going to be taking classes. You may be working a job. You may be involved in research. You may be involved in extracurricular activities. And you're probably not going to want to and probably shouldn't withdraw from all those things just to focus on building this application, which means that really, even though the MCAS application opens for building on May 1st, your process for getting ready to apply starts much, much, much sooner. You're like, well, how does that work? I can't actually start submitting things or actually putting them into the application until May 1st. And yeah, that's fine. But you're going to have Word documents or a Google Drive or something like that with your personal statement, with your activities and all the little essays you have to write for them, already ready to go, ready to copy and paste into the application by the time this date rolls around. This is the right way to do it, in my opinion. Why? Well, applying late is a bad decision and a preventable problem. There's no reason to apply late unless you had extenuating circumstances. Do not let your failure to prepare be the reason that you apply late. And you say, oh, well, why is applying late bad? It's because medical schools use an admissions process called rolling admissions. Rolling admissions means that they are looking at applications as they come in. They're not going to look at all of the applications that they get and then select students. They're going to be selecting students as applications are going to be coming in. They're going to be accepting students as applications are coming in. You want to be one of the first ones that medical schools see when they open their version of the AMCAS portal or the ACOMAS portal and look at these applications that have come in. You want to be one of the first ones in there. Now, in addition to that, even though we haven't discussed this yet, you should be aware of the fact that there are secondary applications that are school specific. They will be sent to you by the individual schools that you submit your primary application to. And these guys take time to fill out. There's more demographic information. A lot of times you have to fill out the same stuff over and over again, and that takes time. Let's just say you apply to 20 medical schools. You don't want to be caught kind of submitting secondary applications to 20 medical schools in a very short window of time. Usually they say, hey, you have 10 days, you have 14 days or whatever to get this back to us. Or really that's the timeline in which you should be trying to get it back, maybe even sooner if you want to be very successful. And this takes time. And so you don't want to be caught working on all these secondary applications at one time. So you need to be prepared, and we're going to talk about how to get you prepared. Now, once you actually submit your application, you're going to be waiting on this thing called application verification. Verification is basically where the people who work for MCAS and the people who work for ACOMAS, they're going to look at your official transcript that was sent to them by your university, and they're going to compare it to what they see on your application in terms of the courses that you have taken and the grades that you received on those courses. This is so that they can establish what your actual medical school GPA is for the purposes of going to medical school. They're going to create a GPA for you that it may be a little bit different than the GPA that your undergraduate university calculated for you. Again, in order to do this, they have to look at your transcript. They have to look at the classes that you said you took when you applied to medical school and match it all up together. That takes a little bit of time. When you apply late, meaning you apply in July, late July, August, whatever, we're talking about that kind of timeline. It takes a very, very, very long time to get verified, as they say, because there are more people trying to get verified. And so when you apply early, let's say you actually submitted your application the very day that it became available at the end of May or beginning of June, whenever it is, you may be able to get verified in the same day, depending on when you submit. You might get verified the next day. You might get verified in 2 or 3 days. But the point is that the faster you get verified, the better. Because the faster you get verified, the faster the medical schools that you're trying to send your application to are actually going to receive that application and begin looking at it. Things to know. So, what's actually in the medical school application? Well, there's some little stuff and there's some big stuff, right? The little stuff is all your demographic information, right? It's all this stuff right here. What's your name? Where were you born? Blah, blah, blah. Family and economic info. You're going to talk about your siblings. You're going to talk about your mom and your dad, not by writing essays, but by checking boxes. How many siblings do you have? How old are they? What are their names? Your mom and your dad, what are their names? Are they living? Are they deceased? Things like that. It's just a bunch of information about you, your family, et cetera, where you're from. But then, of course, is all the big stuff. What's the big stuff? Well, you're going to enter all the classes that you have ever taken in college and beyond into this medical school application, MCAS and ACOMAS, no matter which one you use or both. That takes time. You have to literally type out the name of every single class from a drop-down menu, pick the grade that you received, click submit, do the next one. If you've taken a lot of classes, if you have a bachelor's degree, or maybe 2 bachelor's degrees, or maybe a bachelor's and a master's, or maybe you're almost done with a bachelor's degree, this is a lot of courses that you have to enter. This takes time. There's also an MCAT and GPA report. As I said, the medical school applications will create a GPA for you based on how they calculate GPA, and that will be on your MCAS application. Of course, you don't have to necessarily do anything for them to calculate that for you other than just enter all the classes that you have taken and do that correctly. Of course, we can't not talk about the personal statement, limited to 5,300 characters, about a page, maybe a tad bit longer. That is true for both MCAS and ACOMAS, MD and DO, which is great because you can share an application between the two of them, or share a personal statement rather between the two of them. And in addition to all that, you have the so-called activities section. That's what I call it. That's what most people call it. There's one on MCAS. There's one on ACOMAS. On MCAS, you're limited to 15 total activities, and 3 of them you can consider what they call most meaningful activities. On ACOMAS, you have an unlimited number of activities. Now, are you going to put 50 activities in there? Probably not, right? You're going to put the activities that really matter to you, that are important to you, and then, of course, on MCAS, you have those most meaningful ones as well. Well, what's the significance of a most meaningful application? Well, when you've kind of entered all of your activities, there's a little checkbox next to each one where you can say, hey, this was a most meaningful activity. And if you click that box, it will open up a new window where you write an additional essay, slightly longer, where you talk about why this was your most meaningful activity or one of your most meaningful activities. It's a cool way, in my opinion, for you to talk about something that's really important to you, but not be confined by the very, very small character limits of these little activities essays. You have to write a little essay for each activity. And so the most meaningful section allows you to expound upon an activity that was very important to you. Last but not least, the letters of recommendation are in your application. They are uploaded on your behalf. You cannot see them. In fact, in order to get a letter of recommendation, you are required to waive your right to see that letter. So they are uploaded on your behalf. You will not be able to see them, but nonetheless, they are there. So that's kind of what the application includes. And really mostly this stuff right here is kind of the stuff that you'll see. And the stuff that you'll actually fill out, right? The stuff you will enter. So how do you get your ducks in a row to make sure that you can have a successful application to medical school? The main thing that I can tell you is that applying on time is critical, and I cannot understate this. What do I mean by on time? I mean as soon as possible. I genuinely believe, and I know this is a little bit audacious, but I genuinely believe that if you want to have the maximum success with a medical school application, the maximum possible success, you should apply really the day that the application opens, because you've had all this time to prepare, and you don't want to be caught with your pants down, unprepared, and really just not ready, and creating delays in your application as a result of that. You don't want to create unnecessary delays. You want to apply on time. You want to apply when that application is ready for you to submit, whether it's the very last day of May or the very beginning of June, whatever it may be. Again, I mentioned it. It takes people sometimes even longer than a month just to build that application in the first place. I mean, again, I said you have classes, maybe a job, maybe extracurricular activities that you are working on. You're not going to be sitting there working on a medical school application 4 or 5 hours a day, which is what it may take over the course of the month to really get this done and get it done correctly. In addition to that, you're not going to write your personal statement during that 1 month window. You're going to have your personal statement written already. It will be ready to go, ready to submit, finalized, finished, looking good, cherry on top, long before you ever actually submit your application. Ideally, you're going to have that thing done in like March, maybe April, maybe January, but your personal statement is going to be long out of the way. You don't want to be working on your personal statement when you should just be uploading things to the application. Again, I say writing essays for all of these little activities takes time. That's why you want to do it in advance. That additional essay for your most meaningful activities takes time to write. That's why you want to do it in advance. You have to apply on time. You must work on these things in advance. Why? It's all about this right here. Control the controllables. You need to be preparing for your medical school application up to a year, maybe even more, really, before you apply, depending on where you kind of stand in the process. For example, if you have not decided what activities you are going to put on your medical school application, if you have not written a personal statement and not even begun writing a personal statement, it may take you a year to really do that kind of stuff. It may take you a year to get a really good personal statement together. You're going to write a draft. It's going to be terrible. You're going to take it to someone. They're going to give you revisions. You're going to do those revisions. You're going to take it to someone else. They're going to give you revisions. You're going to set it aside for a couple of weeks. You're going to come back to it and be like, oh my gosh, this sucks. I need to redo it. And then you're going to redo it. You're going to make dramatic changes. And over time, you're going to be chipping away and kind of carving out your story on the personal statement. That takes time. And don't worry, we're going to talk about in a separate module how to actually write a compelling personal statement. But the point of this module is to tell you that it takes time and that you should be aware of that. Know that and believe that. It is not something you're going to do overnight. And you're certainly not going to do it in 5 minutes on ChatGPT, because that's not the right way to do it. It will take time. Control the controllables. Prepare. Get ready in advance. So what should you expect after you actually submit? Well, briefly, we talked about that verification and processing. If you apply on time, the very first day that the application is available to you, maybe the second day, maybe the third day, if you do apply on time, it might only take you a couple days to get verified. So let's say you apply on the first day that the application becomes available to submit. You may be verified the very next day or the day after that. That's great. That means schools are going to get your application first, maybe not absolutely first, but in that first, handful of applications that are coming through. But again, I say, if you apply late, if you apply, here's the thing, even if you apply at the end of June, it may take a month or more to get verified because of the volume of applications that the AMCAS and ACOMAS people have to handle in that time, right? Just be aware of this. And actually, there is a verification tracker that is created on Reddit. I think it's on Student Doctor Network. It's in different places. You can look at that and actually see, based on when you apply, how long does it take to get verified. I would recommend that. Secondary applications come within a few weeks of verification. So usually what will happen is you get verified, you get the email that you got verified, and next thing you know, Duke University wants you or is inviting you to complete a secondary application. Oh, great, that's awesome. Now you have to fill that out. Again, these secondary applications tend to involve some short essays, but they still take time. Usually these essays are very specific about, why our school, what are you going to contribute to the student body here and to the diversity here and, all these different things. And it takes time to write those. Interestingly enough, many people, the most successful people, prepare in advance by pre-writing their secondary applications based on their school list. Once you've established a school list, you can start pre-writing secondary applications anytime. Like, for example, even if there's an application that you know right now, or rather a school that you know right now that you're going to apply to, like you're certain you're going to apply there, you can go complete their secondary application today, if you would so choose, just by going to secondaryapps.com to see the prompt for the secondary application for that school. Each time you decide on another school that you're going to add to your list, you can go complete the secondary application for that. This is a huge way to get ahead. Man, I tell you what, I did this myself. And actually, when I applied to medical school, the school that I really wanted to attend, in fact, the one that I am attending, their application came in, their secondary application came in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. I had that thing submitted by 4:15. And I had an interview invite the following Monday. It's an anecdote, but it's worth taking into consideration. Lastly, after you've submitted your application, after you've been verified, after you've completed your secondary application, then you're waiting for that interview email. That congratulations, or whatever, Duke University is inviting you to interview, and then you pick an interview day and you move forward in the process. And don't worry, we're going to have a module all about interviewing as well. So that's kind of what to expect. Now, what are some other things related to the medical school application that you may have to do? And the answer is there's a couple extra exams, actually, that you may have to take. You're like, oh, more exams? I know. Trust me. I know. It doesn't get any better. You take a lot of exams in medical school, too. But that's the name of the game. And it's okay, because you can do it. Many, many people have come before you. Many people will come after you, and you'll be okay. The first exam that you may have to take is called the Casper exam. I don't know what this stands for. I used to know. It's a situational judgment test. Some schools require it and some schools don't. It doesn't really appear to be a super important factor. It is scored, but I don't think schools are making, yay or nay decisions based entirely on the Casper exam, right? They are simply kind of taking into consideration what they see to see if it aligns with what other things they see in your application or to see if there's some major red flags in there. There's some free response on the Casper exam where you see a situation recorded on a video and then you write how you might respond to that situation. So if you say something absolutely awful, well, they probably will take that into consideration. But they're really just trying to see that you're kind of a normal person, right? That's what the Casper exam is able to communicate. A normal person with good situational judgment skills. Now, the preview exam, this is the professional readiness examination, is an exam that was created by the AAMC. I think it's meant to kind of compete with the Casper exam, if I'm being honest with you. I don't know that for sure, but I think that's what it's meant to do. It's a situational judgment test made by the AAMC. Many schools, especially MD schools, do require it, but again, it does not appear to be an important factor. One of the reasons I believe this to be true is because I have spoken to many, 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 many people who took the very first iteration of the preview exam, the first year that it was required for their schools, and they did very poorly, and they still got accepted to medical school. So schools are going to decide how they want to interpret what they see on the preview exam and the Casper exam. There's no way for you to know, perhaps unless you ask, but it's just good to be aware that you may have to take these exams. They're relatively short. They don't take a lot of time. You knock them out in an afternoon. No big deal. I was actually living in Alabama, working in a kidney laboratory when I took my preview exam. I just came back to my apartment, sat down. You're basically, you have like a digital proctor via the webcam, and I took my exam in an afternoon and moved on with my life, and everything was okay. Important to recognize, though, these things do cost money. The Casper exam is $85 if you send it to the first 7 schools, and then it's $18 for every school that you send it to thereafter. The preview exam is $100. It is a fee that is waived if you have the fee assistance program. I don't make the rules. I don't like it either. This is just the way that it is, the name of the game. I don't think there is a fee assistance program for Casper. At least there wasn't when I took it. So maybe there is now. I don't know. It's worth checking. The key takeaway here is that these are things that you might have to do. So just check based on the schools that you want to apply to, whether they require these things, just so you know that you're going to need to take them or not. Chances are, if you've got 20 medical schools on your school list, you're going to be taking at least one of these exams and maybe both. Rest assured, more than likely, one of these exams is going to be something that you'll have to complete. So the bonus for this module is really how to make a plan, right? How to make a plan to apply to medical school. And I really think that in order to make a plan to apply to medical school, it really starts by going all the way back to thinking about where you are now. Where are you in your degree process? That's going to tell you when you would apply to medical school, right? The earliest that you could probably reasonably apply to medical school is the summer or May, finishing up your junior year. Perhaps some people could apply earlier based on prerequisites that they've taken, based on whatever. But if you're kind of a traditional college student, you came out of high school, you did freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, the earliest that you would apply to medical school is most likely going to be the end of your junior year. But even that is very zealous. I think it's excellent. I think it's amazing when people are able to do that. Some other people are not able to do that. For some people, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior just kind of start to fall apart because they're taking classes for 5 years or 6 years. And so none of that stuff even really kind of makes sense anymore, especially if they're a non-traditional student. But the point is you need to decide based on what the requirements that the medical schools that you want to apply to actually have. You need to decide when you want to apply. Maybe you're watching this in August and you're like, oh man, it would have been great to apply back in May. Okay, yeah, probably too late. You are not going to have time to get an application together in the next 7 days or something like that you would probably need to in order to have a good shot at applying. But it may be that if you're watching this in August, you'll be applying next year in May. And that's a reasonable timeline if you're actually ready to do so. So this requires thinking about when you're going to apply to medical school. If you do not know when you are going to apply to medical school, it's difficult to begin preparing. I say this because you don't want to create unnecessary frustration or disappointment for yourself in this process. It's already a difficult process, right? It's not easy. And what you don't want to do is, maybe it's March and you're like, oh, I really want to apply in May. Or maybe it's April and you're like, I really want to apply in May so I can get accepted to medical school this year. And you get, just so excited, and the anticipation of applying to medical school just overwhelms you and you're so excited about it. But then the timeline is just not working because you weren't really prepared for that. And then you're like, oh, I'm not going to be able to apply to medical school this year. I'm going to have to wait another year. That actually happened to me. And let me tell you, it's okay. It's fine. It's not the end of the world. Maybe you have a gap year or something like that you can use to go work a job and get some great experience, save some money. Who knows? But it's fine. So you need to be realistic about your decision about when to apply to medical school. As I said, prep really does begin like a year or more in advance. Again, if it's August, I think that's a good timeline. I think August to May gives you enough time, if you're focused and diligent, to really kind of get all your ducks in a row and make these kind of things happen. It's going to take a lot of time to make that personal statement. It's going to take a lot of time to figure out what activities you want to write about and write about them. It's going to take time to connect with the people who are going to become your letter writers. All this just takes time, and it doesn't happen automatically. You have to go out there and do it. So get out your get out your calendar and make a timeline is my recommendation to you. You need to figure out when you're going to take the MCAT. That's really the biggest question, because you can't apply to medical school. Well, you can apply to medical school. You will not get accepted without having an MCAT score on file. So you need to decide when to take the MCAT. Again, most people want to take the MCAT in the winter before they apply so that they get that score back, and then they have time to make decisions about whether that's a score that they want to apply with or whether that's a score they need to retake. You need to decide when to start working on that personal statement. The sooner the better. There's nothing stopping you from starting today. You can start jotting down ideas and things that are coming to mind anytime. It doesn't have to become a perfect personal statement overnight. It takes months to do that. It took me almost 2 years to write the personal statement that I actually used to apply to medical school. I was working on it on and off and on and off and on and off and on and off. 20 months, 21 months, something like that. You want to know when to begin working on those activities essays. Yeah, these don't take as much time as other things, but they still take time. When to begin pre-writing those secondaries. This takes more time than people think it does, and therefore I think it should be something considered, when you're kind of doing other stuff like working on your personal statement. You should kind of all be working on this stuff together, especially because many of the ideas that you communicate in your personal statement, you will also communicate in those secondary applications. You'll see when you go to secondaryapps.com and you see the prompts for these secondary applications, you will see what I'm talking about when I say that. Again, a lot of this stuff kind of can happen simultaneously. Yes, you can do a lot of this stuff at the same time, but you need to have a plan. Again, be realistic. You cannot work on med school stuff for 6 hours a day when you have other things going on, when you have classes to take, when you have a job to work, when you have extracurriculars. You're like, you're going to overwhelm yourself. You're going to get angry. You're going to get upset. You're going to get frustrated. You're going to get disappointed. And disappointment is not great in this process because, again, it's already hard. So don't create unnecessary disappointment for yourself. Well, guys, that's it. That's a little bit about applying to medical school, using the application. My encouragement to you is go make an account with MCAS. My encouragement to you is go make an account with ACOMAS. Log into those suckers, see what's on there, really get a feel for them, right? And start thinking about how it's going to work for you, how it's going to go for you. That is my best encouragement to you. More information is always better, in my opinion. Knowledge is power in this situation. So with that, guys, we will see you in the next module.